You can't honestly expect us to sit next to her, the woman sneered, her voice carrying over the soft jazz music. Sarah felt the cold splash of Chardonnay hit her shoulder before she even looked up. She was sitting quietly at the head table, nursing a glass of water, when the couple loomed over her. The man, adjusting a silk tie that cost more than Sarah's entire outfit, didn't even make eye contact. "Security," he snapped, snapping his fingers. "Get this help out of the VIP section." They thought she was a seat filler. They had no idea that the name on the massive banner behind them, the Sterling Foundation, belonged to the man she kissed goodbye this morning. When her husband walks through those doors, the silence in this room is going to be deafening. The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel in New York City smelled of expensive lilies, old money, and desperation. It was the kind of charity gala where the charity was secondary to the networking, and the networking was really just a polite way of measuring net worth. Sarah adjusted the hem of her dress. It was a simple navy blue A-line, bought off the rack at Macy's 3 years ago. It didn't shimmer like the sequined gowns sweeping the floor around her, nor did it have the daring, plunging neckline that seemed to be the fashion this season. She wore no jewelry except for a thin gold band on her ring finger. To the untrained eye, or perhaps the arrogant eye, she looked like she didn't belong. And that suited Sarah just fine. She checked her phone. Stuck in traffic on 5th, 10 minutes out. Love you. E. She smiled, tucking the phone away. Her husband, Ethan Sterling, was the keynote speaker tonight. He was also the man signing the checks for the entire evening. But Sarah hated the spotlight. While Ethan thrived in the boardroom and on the stage, Sarah preferred the quiet corners. She had arrived early to make sure the floral arrangements were correct. She had a soft spot for white hydrangeas and had collapsed into the chair at the center table, her feet aching from a long day teaching third graders. The table was marked "Reserved Sterling Party," but the placard had fallen flat against the tablecloth, hidden by a centerpiece. "God, this place is a zoo!" A sharp female voice sliced through Sarah's thoughts. Sarah looked up. Standing over her was a couple that looked like they had been manufactured in a laboratory dedicated to vanity. The woman, Jessica, was striking but terrifying. She wore a red dress that looked like it was painted on, and her blonde hair was pulled back so tight it pulled her eyes into a permanent glare. The man, Brad, was the quintessential corporate climber. Slicked back hair, a jawline he clenched constantly, and a Patek Philippe watch he made sure was always visible. "Brad, look," Jessica said, pointing a manicured nail at Sarah. "We're at table 1, right next to the Sterlings. But what is that doing there?" Brad looked down at Sarah with a mixture of confusion and disgust. He didn't see a person, he saw an obstacle. He saw a stain on the perfect picture he wanted to post to Instagram later. "Excuse me," Brad said. He didn't say it politely. It was the "excuse me" used by people who expect you to apologize for existing. "You're in our seats." Sarah blinked, taken aback. "Oh, hello. Actually, I think there might be a mistake." There is a mistake," Jessica interrupted, rolling her eyes. She dropped her clutch, a tiny glittery thing worth $4,000, onto the table with a clatter. "The mistake is that the staff let the help sit down." "Are you a waitress? A coordinator?" "We need water. Sparkling. Now." Sarah felt the heat rise in her cheeks. It wasn't the first time she'd been underestimated, but the sheer aggression caught her off guard. "I'm not a waitress," Sarah said, her voice soft but firm. "I'm waiting for my husband." Brad laughed. It was a dry, humorless bark. "Your husband? Who is he? The valet? Listen, sweetheart, we paid $5,000 a plate to sit at this table. We are gold-tier donors. We are here to meet Ethan Sterling, not to make conversation with someone who looks like she got lost on her way to a parent-teacher conference. "Brad, don't waste your breath," Jessica hissed, leaning in. She picked up her wine glass, which she had brought from the bar, and swirled it dangerously close to Sarah. "Honey, look around you. Look at the diamonds. Look at the tuxedos. Then look at yourself. You are ruining the aesthetic of the head table. Move. Now." Sarah didn't move. She simply stared at them, a calm resolve settling in her stomach. "I have every right to be here," she said. That was the wrong thing to say. Jessica's hand slipped. A wave of chilled Chardonnay splashed over Sarah's shoulder, soaking into the fabric of her modest blue dress. The cold liquid shocked her, but the gasp from the nearby tables was louder. "Oops," Jessica said, her face devoid of any regret. "Now you have to leave. You're a mess." Sarah stood up, grabbing a napkin to dab at the wine stain spreading across her shoulder. Her heart was pounding, not from fear, but from a simmering anger she was trying hard to control. She was a teacher. She dealt with bullies on the playground every day. But usually, those bullies were 8 years old, not 35-year-old socialites. "That was incredibly rude," Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly. "Rude?" Brad stepped forward, using his height to intimidate her. He loomed over her, smelling of expensive cologne and scotch. "Rude is you occupying a seat reserved for VIPs. I am the regional VP of Argon Systems. Do you know who that is? We are acquiring companies left and right. I don't have time to argue with a nobody." He turned and snapped his fingers loudly. "Manager, you, get over here." A man in a tuxedo scurried over. It was Henri, the banquet manager. Sarah knew Henri. She had spoken to him earlier that afternoon about the hydrangeas. He had been polite then, but now, faced with a screaming man in a $5,000 suit, Henri looked panicked. "Yes, sir." "Is there a problem?" Henri asked, his eyes darting between Brad and Sarah. "Big problem, Henry," Jessica sneered. "We are trying to enjoy the sterling gala. We paid a fortune, and this woman refuses to vacate our table. And look at her. She spilled wine on herself. It's disgusting. She smells like a bar mat." Henry looked at Sarah. He hesitated. He recognized her face vaguely, but in the dim mood lighting, and with her hair slightly messy from the wine splash, he couldn't quite place her. What he did see was Brad's gold tier donor badge, pinned to his lapel. In the hospitality industry, the customer with the loudest voice and the biggest wallet is usually right. "Mom," Henri said, turning to Sarah with a strained smile. "I'm going to have to ask you to move." Sarah looked at him, disappointed. "Henry, it's me." "Sarah. We spoke about the flowers earlier." Henry squinted. He didn't want to risk a scene. Brad was already pulling out his phone, threatening to tweet about the horrible service. I don't recall," Henri lied, choosing the path of least resistance. "Mom, please, these guests have reserved tickets. If you don't have a ticket for table 1, I need you to step away. You can stand by the bar in the back if you are general admission." "I don't have a ticket," Sarah admitted. She didn't need one. She was the host. "Ha!" Brad exclaimed, throwing his hands up. "She admits it. No ticket. She's a crasher. Probably trying to snag a rich husband or steal some silverware." "I am not a crasher," Sarah said, her voice hardening. "I am waiting for Ethan." "Ethan?" Jessica laughed screechily. "She's on a first-name basis with the billionaire now. Oh, this is rich. Did you match with him on Tinder, honey? Did he promise to fly you out?" "Henry," Brad barked. "Get security. Escort her out. If she's not gone in 2 minutes, I'm pulling my donation, and I will personally ensure you never work in this city again." Henri went pale. The threat to his job was the final straw. He dropped the polite facade. "Ma'am, you need to leave." "Now," Henri said, grabbing Sarah's arm firmly. Sarah pulled her arm back. "Do not touch me." "Then walk," Henri hissed, "before I have you dragged out." The commotion was attracting attention. People were whispering. Phones were out, recording. Sarah realized that if she made a scene now, it would ruin Ethan's big night. The headlines wouldn't be about the charity. They would be about a brawl at the head table. She loved Ethan too much to let that happen. She took a deep breath, smoothing her dress. She looked at Brad, then at Jessica, and finally at Henry. "Fine," Sarah said quietly. "I'll move." "Finally," Jessica huffed, dusting off the seat Sarah had vacated as if it were contaminated. "Sanitize that chair, Henry." Sarah picked up her small clutch. "You really shouldn't have done this," she said to the couple. "You have no idea how much you're going to regret this." Brad laughed, pouring himself a glass of the wine that was meant for the table host. "The only thing I regret is that you didn't leave 5 minutes ago. Go back to the coat check, Cinderella." Sarah turned and walked away, the sound of their laughter following her. She didn't go to the exit, though. She walked toward the backstage entrance, past the confused security guards who tried to stop her, until she flashed a look so fierce they stepped aside. She found a quiet corner in the wings of the stage and pulled out her phone. "I'm here," the text from Ethan read. "Walking in the side door now. Sorry I'm late." Sarah typed back. "Don't come to the table yet. Meet me backstage. We have a situation." Out in the ballroom, the lights dimmed. The announcer's voice boomed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program is about to begin. And now please welcome the man who made tonight possible, Mr. Ethan Sterling." The spotlight hit the stage, but it remained empty. The applause started, then wavered. People looked around confused. At table 1, Brad and Jessica were clapping enthusiastically, beaming at the empty stage. "He's probably just making a dramatic entrance," Brad whispered to Jessica. "Watch, he'll come right to our table first. I'm going to pitch him the merger idea as soon as he shakes my hand." "Fix your tie," Jessica whispered back. "We need to look perfect." Backstage, Ethan Sterling, a man who controlled a multi-billion-dollar empire, was staring at the wine stain on his wife's dress. His face, usually calm and composed, was darkening with a rage that terrified his board members. "Who?" was the only word he said. Sarah looked up at him. "Table 1, a man named Brad and a woman named Jessica, and Henri helped them." Ethan adjusted his cufflinks. He didn't yell. He didn't throw things. He went very, very quiet. "Give me your hand," Ethan said, extending his arm to her. "I can't go out there like this, Ethan," Sarah said, gesturing to the stain. "I look like a mess." "No," Ethan said, his voice fierce with loyalty. "You look like the only real thing in that room, and we are going to go out there, and we are going to retake your seat." "Ethan, the speech." "Forget the speech," Ethan said, leading her toward the curtain. "I have a new announcement to make." The silence in the grand ballroom stretched thin, like a rubber band ready to snap. The master of ceremonies, a local news anchor named Greg, who was usually unflappable, tapped his microphone nervously. "Ladies and gentlemen, a minor technical difficulty. Mr. Sterling will be with us momentarily." At table 1, Brad chuckled, leaning back in the chair he had bullied Sarah out of. "See? He's making them wait. That's a power move. I respect that. When you're at his level, time is just a suggestion." Jessica reapplied her lip gloss, using her phone as a mirror. "I just hope he doesn't bring that sad little woman back out. Can you believe she tried to claim she knew him? The delusion of some people. Forget her, Brad dismissed, checking his reflection in a spoon. Focus, Jess. When he comes down here, I'm going to lead with the Argon Systems portfolio. I need you to charm him. Laugh at his jokes, even if they aren't funny. Suddenly, the heavy velvet curtains at the side of the stage parted. The spotlight, which had been searching the empty podium, swung violently to the left. It caught two figures standing in the wings. A collective gasp rippled through the room. There was Ethan Sterling, looking every bit the billionaire titan in his bespoke black tuxedo. But he wasn't alone, and he wasn't smiling. His face was set in a mask of cold fury that made the air in the room drop 10 degrees. Gripped firmly in his left hand was the hand of a woman in a simple navy blue dress. A dress that was visibly stained with dark liquid on the shoulder. Her hair was slightly mussed, and her eyes were red-rimmed, but she held her head high. Is that... Jessica squinted against the glare of the spotlight. Brad, is that the waitress? Brad frowned, confused. Why is he holding the help's hand? Maybe she attacked him. Maybe he's dragging her out personally to make an example of her. That has to be it. Jessica nodded rapidly. God, he's so alpha. I love it. But Ethan didn't drag her. He escorted her. He adjusted his pace to match hers. He didn't walk toward the podium to give his speech. Instead, he walked down the stairs, straight onto the floor of the ballroom. The spotlight operator, sensing the shift, followed them. A beam of stark white light cut through the darkness, illuminating Ethan and Sarah as they began a slow, deliberate march towards the center of the room. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. People who were seated turned in their chairs. Those standing near the edges craned their necks. The whispers began to rise, a cacophony of confusion. Who is that? Is that his mistress? Why is her dress ruined? Look at his face. He looks like he's going to kill someone. Sarah felt the weight of 500 pairs of eyes on her. Her instinct was to shrink, to hide behind Ethan's broad shoulders. But Ethan squeezed her hand, a silent signal of strength. Don't hide, the squeeze said. Let them see you. They passed table 10, table 5, table 3. Brad watched them approach, his heart hammering against his ribs. He's coming this way, Brad hissed, straightening his tie for the 10th time. He's coming right to the VIP table. I told you, Jess. He knows who the players are. Brad stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He put on his best business smile, a terrifying baring of teeth that was meant to convey confidence. Mr. Sterling, Brad called out as Ethan got within 10 feet. Brad stepped out from the table, blocking the path, effectively intercepting them. Brad Connolly, VP of Argon Systems. It is an honor, sir. We were just... Ethan didn't stop. He didn't slow down. He walked straight at Brad until he was inches from his face, forcing Brad to stumble back a step to avoid a collision. Ethan stopped. The spotlight halted with them, bathing the three of them, Ethan, Sarah, and a sweating Brad, in blinding light. Jessica remained seated, holding her wine glass, looking up with a confused smile. Ethan didn't look at Brad. He looked past him, at the table, at the specific chair Jessica was sitting in, and the empty chair next to her where Brad had been. Mr. Sterling, Brad tried again, his voice cracking slightly. He noticed Sarah standing next to the billionaire. Brad's brain scrambled to make sense of it. He decided to double down on his earlier narrative. Sir, I see you've found the intruder, Brad said, gesturing vaguely at Sarah with a laugh. She was bothering us earlier, trying to crash the VIP table. If she's bothering you, I can call security back. Henri, the manager, is already aware she's a problem. Sarah went rigid. Ethan slowly turned his head, his eyes locked onto Brad's. It was the look a lion gives a gazelle just before the pounce. Not angry, but predatory. "Intruder," Ethan repeated. His voice was low, but in the silent ballroom it carried like thunder. "Yes, sir," Brad said, gaining confidence because Ethan had spoken to him. "Just some random woman. Spilled wine all over herself. Clumsy, really. We told her to leave, but you know how these people are. Stick around for the free food, right?" Brad laughed, looking around for validation. No one laughed with him. Jessica chimed in from her seat, raising her glass. She actually claimed she was waiting for her husband. Can you imagine? Probably wanted to pickpocket someone. Ethan released Sarah's hand, only to wrap his arm protectively around her waist, pulling her flush against him. The intimacy of the gesture was undeniable. It wasn't the grip of a captor. It was the embrace of a lover. Brad's smile faltered. His brain finally began to process the data his eyes were sending him. The protective stance, the shared look, the rage directed outward, not at the woman. "You told her to leave?" Ethan asked, his voice deceptively calm. "Well, yes," Brad stammered. "She was in the reserved seats. Your seats, actually. We didn't want your night ruined by the help." "My night," Ethan said, "was ruined the moment my wife texted me that 2 strangers assaulted her." The word hung in the air. Wife. Brad felt his stomach drop through the floor and keep going until it hit the basement. "Well, wife! Wife!" Jessica dropped her wine glass. It didn't break on the carpet, but the red liquid splashed up onto her expensive red dress, staining the hem instantly. Ethan reached out and grabbed a microphone from a passing stagehand who had run down to assist. He clicked it on. The feedback squeal made everyone wince, but it got their attention. Ethan turned to the crowd, turning his back on Brad and Jessica for a moment, leaving them freezing in the shadow of his rejection. "I apologize for the delay," Ethan spoke into the mic, his voice booming through the speakers. "I had prepared a speech tonight about generosity, about how the Sterling Foundation aims to lift people up, about how we judge a society by how it treats its most vulnerable." He paused, looking around the room. "But tonight, I realized that charity is useless if it is not accompanied by basic human decency. I walked in here tonight and found that the person who inspired this entire foundation, the woman who taught me everything I know about kindness, was treated like garbage in my own ballroom." He turned back to face Brad and Jessica. The spotlight seemed to sear into them. Brad was shaking now, visibly trembling. Jessica was pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "This," Ethan said, gesturing to Sarah, "is Sarah Sterling. She is not a seat filler. She is not the help. She is the chairwoman of the board. She is a 3rd-grade teacher who spends her days shaping the future and her nights helping me figure out how to give away our money effectively. She is the reason you are all here eating this food." A murmur of shock swept through the room. People who had ignored Sarah earlier were now looking at her with wide eyes. Ethan stepped closer to Brad. "And you are?" I, Brad choked. Brad Connolly. Argon Systems." "Argon Systems," Ethan repeated, as if tasting a rotten lemon. "I know Argon. You have a merger pending with one of my subsidiaries, don't you? Tech Logistics?" Brad nodded vigorously, a glimmer of hope returning. Yes, sir. A huge deal. It was going to, Ethan corrected. Brad froze. "Sir?" "Do you think," Ethan said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper that the microphone still caught perfectly, "that I would sign a $100 million contract with a man who judges a woman by the price of her dress? Do you think I would trust my business with a man who bullies someone he deems beneath him?" Ethan looked at Jessica. And you. You spilled wine on her. Deliberately. It was an accident, Jessica shrieked, her voice shrill and panicked. I swear, I didn't know who she was. That, Sarah spoke up for the first time. She took the microphone from Ethan's hand. Her voice was soft, but it was steady. That is exactly the problem. She stepped forward, the stain on her dress looking like a badge of honor now. You didn't know who I was, so you treated me like dirt. If you had known I was Mrs. Sterling, you would have kissed my feet. That doesn't make you misunderstood, Jessica. It makes you a fake. Sarah looked at Brad. You called me a nobody. You said I was ruining the aesthetic. Well, Brad, look around. Sarah gestured to the room. Hundreds of people were staring at Brad with disgust. The social climbers, the elites, the people Brad desperately wanted to impress, they were all judging him. You wanted to be the center of attention, Sarah said. Congratulations. You are. Brad looked around. He saw the sneers. He saw people whispering behind their hands. He saw the destruction of his reputation happening in real time. Mr. Sterling, please, Brad begged, sweat dripping down his nose. I can explain. We were just stressed. The traffic, the heat. Get out, Ethan said. It wasn't a scream. It was a command. Get out. But the merger, Brad whispered. The merger is dead, Ethan said. And tomorrow morning, I'm going to make a few phone calls. I know the board at Argonne. I know your CEO. I wonder what he'll think when he sees the video of you harassing his biggest investor's wife. Brad looked at the guests. Phones were raised everywhere. The red recording lights were like hundreds of tiny, judgmental eyes. It was already online. It was already over. And take your gold tier badge, Ethan said, reaching out and plucking the gold pin from Brad's lapel. I'll be refunding your donation. The Sterling Foundation doesn't want your money. It's dirty. Ethan tossed the pin onto the table. It clattered next to the silverware. Security, Ethan called out. From the shadows, 4 large men in black suits materialized. But they weren't alone. Henry, the banquet manager, was shuffling behind them, looking like he was walking to his own execution. Henry, Ethan said, acknowledging the manager. Mr. Sterling, Henry squeaked. I had no idea. It was your job to know, Ethan said simply. You let these 2 harass a guest. You sided with the bully because he had a louder voice. You are the manager of the Pierre's Grand Ballroom. You are supposed to have discretion. You have none. Please, sir, Henry pleaded. I have a family. And my wife has dignity, Ethan countered, which you helped strip away. I don't employ the staff here, Henri, so I can't fire you. But I can promise you that the Sterling Foundation will never host an event at the Pierre again as long as you are employed here. That is a $2 million a year contract. Ethan let that sink in. He was putting the hotel's revenue against Henri's job. It was a ruthless business calculation, and everyone knew who the hotel owners would choose. Escort Mr. Connolly and his companion out, Ethan ordered the security guards, and ensure they don't stop at the coat check. They can wait for their coats on the curb. The guards moved in. One of them grabbed Brad by the elbow. Don't touch me, Brad snapped, trying to regain a shred of dignity. I know the way. Then start walking, the guard said, shoving him slightly. Jessica grabbed her clutch, holding it like a shield. She wouldn't look at Sarah. She kept her head down, her red soles clicking rapidly on the floor as she scurried after Brad, creating a path of shame toward the exit. The entire room watched them leave. It was a walk of shame that felt like it lasted an hour. When the double doors finally swung shut behind them, the room remained silent. Ethan took the microphone back from Sarah. He looked at the crowd. The anger in his face softened as he looked back at his wife. He took off his tuxedo jacket. With a gentle motion, he draped it over Sarah's shoulders, covering the wine stain and enveloping her in his warmth. "Now," Ethan said, his voice returning to a conversational tone, though it was heavy with emotion. "I believe my wife was hungry, and she was promised a seat at table 1. Ethan pulled out the chair, the one Brad had vacated, and gestured for Sarah to sit. "After you, Madam Chairwoman." Sarah sat down. She looked at the fresh glass of water. The waiter, not Henry, a new waiter who looked terrified but eager, placed in front of her. Ethan sat in the chair Jessica had vacated. He took Sarah's hand on top of the table. "So," Ethan said, ignoring the room full of stunned millionaires. "How was your day with the third graders?" Sarah smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached her eyes. "It was good, Ethan. Better than the evening, anyway." The crowd hesitated, and then, slowly, someone started clapping. Then another. Then the whole room erupted. It wasn't the polite golf clap of a charity gala. It was genuine applause for the show of loyalty, justice, and love they had just witnessed. But the story wasn't over. Brad Connolly wasn't the type of man to go down without a fight. And as he stood on the curb outside the Pierre, shivering in the New York chill, dialing his lawyer, he decided he was going to destroy the Sterlings, even if it cost him everything. The sidewalk outside the Pierre Hotel was biting cold, a sharp contrast to the golden warmth of the ballroom they had just been ejected from. Brad Connolly stood by the curb, his knuckles white as he gripped his phone. He wasn't calling a car, he was scrubbing his social media. "This is a disaster," Jessica whimpered, shivering in her strapless dress. She hugged her arms around herself, her makeup smudged. "Brad, everyone saw, the way he looked at us. My friends are texting me. They're laughing. Someone posted a meme of me dropping the wine glass already." "Shut up, Jessica," Brad snapped, turning on her with a viciousness that made her recoil. "Stop whining and think. We are not the losers here. We are the victims. That's how the world works now. It doesn't matter what actually happened. It matters who tells the story first." Brad opened a video editing app on his phone. He had recorded a snippet of the confrontation, specifically the part where Ethan had ordered security to remove them. But Brad was clever. He cropped out the beginning where he had insulted Sarah. He cut out the part where Sarah revealed her identity. What remained was a 20-second clip that looked very different from reality. In Brad's edit, it looked like a drunk, power-mad billionaire was screaming at a confused couple, while his wife stood by looking disheveled and smug. He typed a caption, his fingers flying across the screen. "Attacked by Ethan Sterling tonight at the charity gala. We asked his wife politely to move because she was sitting in our assigned seats, and he had his goons throw us out. This is how the 1% treats honest people. Boycott Sterling, yash billionaire bully, yash justice." He tagged Page 6, TMZ, and the Shade Room. Then he hit post. "What are you doing?" Jessica asked, looking over his shoulder. "I'm burning it down," Brad said, a dark smile twisting his lips. "If I'm going down, I'm taking his reputation with me. By morning, he won't be the philanthropist hero. He'll be the elitist snob who assaults his donors." The next morning, Sarah woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of silence. It was too quiet. Usually, Ethan had the news playing in the kitchen. She walked downstairs in her robe, still feeling the emotional exhaustion from the night before. Ethan was sitting at the kitchen island of their penthouse, staring at his tablet. He looked up as she entered, and she saw something in his eyes she rarely saw. Fear. Not for himself, but for her. "Don't look at your phone," Ethan said immediately. Why? Sarah asked, her stomach tightening. Ethan, what happened? Brad Connolly, Ethan said, his voice like gravel. He posted a video. It's edited. It's gone viral, Sarah. 4 million views overnight. Sarah grabbed her phone from the counter, despite his warning. Her notifications were blown up. Hundreds of hateful comments on her old Instagram photos. Gold digger. Learn to sit in your own seat. You look like a mess. No wonder he has to pay people to like you. But the worst blow came 10 minutes later. Sarah's phone rang. It was the number for Liberty Elementary School. Hello? Sarah answered, her voice trembling. Sarah. The principal's voice was stiff, formal. I'm afraid I have some bad news. We've been inundated with calls this morning. Parents are concerned. They're saying you were intoxicated at a public event, that you caused a scene. That's a lie, Sarah cried out, tears springing to her eyes. Mrs. Gable, you know me. I was bullied. I was the victim. The video looks bad, Sarah, the principal sighed. And the school board is very strict about the moral conduct clause in your contract. Until this blows over, or until there is an investigation, I have to place you on administrative leave. Indefinitely. Do not come in today. The line went dead. Sarah dropped the phone. It clattered onto the marble floor. Being a teacher wasn't just a job for her, it was her identity. It was the one thing she had that was hers, separate from Ethan's money. And Brad had taken it away with a 20-second lie. Ethan stood up. The sound of his chair scraping against the floor was violent. He walked over to Sarah and held her as she began to sob. He took my class, Ethan. She wept into his chest. He took my kids. Ethan stroked her hair, his eyes fixed on the skyline of New York City through the window. His expression was no longer just angry. It was lethal. He thinks he's playing a PR game, Ethan whispered. He thinks this is about likes and retweets. He has no idea what he just started. Ethan pulled away and walked to the wall phone, dialing a number from memory. Get me David Boys, Ethan said into the receiver, naming one of the most ruthless litigators in the country. And get me the head of Kroll Private Investigations. I want a forensic audit of Brad Connolly's entire life. I want to know where he eats, where he sleeps, and every cent he has ever spent. I want to know the name of his first-grade teacher. Destroy him. 3 days later, the atmosphere in the Sterling Holdings boardroom was suffocating. Ethan sat at the head of the table. To his right was David Boys, the lawyer, looking relaxed but shark-like. To his left was a man named Miller, an ex-CIA operative who now ran high-stakes corporate investigations. On the massive screen at the front of the room was a dossier on Brad Connolly. It's worse than we thought, Miller said, clicking a remote. A spreadsheet filled the screen. Brad isn't just a jerk, he's a criminal. Explain, Ethan said, leaning forward. Argonne Systems has a charity matching program, Miller explained. Employees donate to approved non-profits, and the company matches it. Brad has been running the program for 3 years. He set up a shell non-profit called the Connolly Initiative. It sounds legitimate, aimed at inner-city youth sports. But look at the outflows. Miller clicked again. Images of luxury items appeared. He's been funneling the company's charity matching funds, about $400,000 a year, into this shell company, and the Connolly Initiative has been buying consulting services from a firm in the Cayman Islands. Guess who owns the Cayman firm? Brad, Ethan said. Bingo, Miller nodded. He's stealing from sick kids and poor communities to pay for his Patek Philippe watches and that lease on his Porsche. It's wire fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. Federal prison time. 10 years. minimum. This is the nail in the coffin, the lawyer, David, noted, tapping his pen. We can hand this to the FBI this afternoon, but it doesn't solve the PR problem. The public still thinks Sarah is the villain because of that video. We need a retraction. We need a confession. We need a witness, Ethan corrected. Just then, Ethan's personal assistant knocked on the glass door. She looked nervous. Mr. Sterling, there's a woman in the lobby. She says she has information about Brad Connolly. She says it's urgent. Who is it? Ethan asked. Her name is Jessica Vane. The room went silent. Bring her up, Ethan said. But search her first. No recording devices. 5 minutes later, Jessica walked into the boardroom. She looked nothing like the polished socialite from the gala. She was wearing sunglasses, a hoodie, and jeans. She looked exhausted. Her hands were shaking. She stopped at the end of the long table, intimidated by the men in suits staring at her. Mrs. Sterling isn't here? Jessica asked, her voice raspy. She's at home, trying to figure out how to salvage her career that you helped destroy, Ethan said coldly. Give me one reason why I shouldn't have you arrested for defamation right now. Jessica pulled down her sunglasses. She had a bruise on her cheek, hastily covered with makeup. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Did he do that? He's spiraling, Jessica whispered, tears leaking out. When the video went viral, he was happy. But then Argon Systems started asking questions about the negative press. He got drunk. He started blaming me. He said I wasn't supportive enough. He threw a heavy crystal decanter at the wall. A shard hit me. She took a shaky breath. I broke up with him this morning. I tried to leave the apartment. He told me that if I left, he would pin the embezzlement on me. He put my name on the bank accounts for the shell company without me knowing. Ethan looked at Miller, who checked his laptop and nodded. Her name is on the signatory list for the Cayman account. Secondary signer. I didn't steal a dime, Jessica pleaded. I'm vain, Mr. Sterling. I'm rude. I admit that. I judged your wife because her dress was cheap. I'm a terrible person, maybe. But I am not a thief, and I am not going to jail for Brad. Why are you here? Ethan asked. I have the unedited video, Jessica said. Ethan froze. What? I was recording too, Jessica admitted. From my angle, on the table. I caught the whole thing. Brad spilling the wine first. Well, bumping my arm to make me spill it. I saw him do it on purpose. I have him calling Sarah a nobody. I have the full audio of him threatening Henri, and... She reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. I have a recording from the taxi ride home. He admits to editing the video. He laughs about getting Sarah fired. He calls it destroying the little teacher. Ethan stood up slowly. He walked to the end of the table. He took the flash drive from Jessica's trembling hand. If I give you this, Jessica said, looking down, will you keep me out of prison? I'll testify against him regarding the fraud. I'll tell the world the truth. Just, please don't let me go down with him. Ethan looked at the bruise on her face, then at the drive in his hand. Miller, Ethan said without looking away from Jessica. Call the district attorney. Tell them we are bringing them a fraud case on a silver platter. And tell them Ms. Vane is a cooperating witness who requires immunity. He looked at Jessica. You're going to help us fix this. You are going to go on national television, and you are going to apologize to Sarah, publicly. I will, Jessica nodded rapidly. I'll do anything. Ethan pocketed the drive. Good, because tomorrow, Brad Connolly is going to have a very bad day. The rented conference room in downtown Manhattan smelled of stale coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. a far cry from the lavender-scented air of the Pierre Hotel. But to Brad Connolly, it smelled like victory. He stood behind a plexiglass podium, checking his reflection in the lens of a news camera. He felt invincible. In just 48 hours, he had orchestrated a masterclass in modern manipulation. The video of him being bullied by Ethan Sterling had crossed 10 million views. He wasn't just a regional vice president anymore. He was a symbol. He was the David standing up to the corporate Goliath. He had even set up a GoFundMe for his legal defense against billionaire tyranny, which had already raised nearly $50,000 from unsuspecting sympathizers who bought into his sob story. "Mr. Connolly, are we ready?" a reporter from a tabloid blog asked, holding up her phone. "One moment," Brad said, smoothing his tie. It was a cheaper tie than the one he wore to the gala, a calculated move to look more relatable, more working class. "I want to make sure the lighting captures the stress I've been under." He cleared his throat and leaned into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press," Brad began, his voice practiced and somber. "I am a simple man. I grew up in a neighborhood where you had to fight for everything you had. I worked my way up from nothing, clawing my way into the corporate world with nothing but grit and determination. And to be treated like a criminal, to be thrown out onto the street like garbage just because I sat in the wrong chair. It's un-American." He paused for effect, letting the cameras click. He squeezed his eyes shut for a moment, feigning holding back tears. "The Sterlings think their money puts them above the law," he continued, his voice rising with righteous indignation. "They think they can buy silence. They think they can bully a teacher, my former fiancée, Jessica, who is too traumatized to even be here today, and destroy my reputation. But they forgot one thing. You can't buy the truth." The reporters nodded sympathetically. The narrative was perfect. "Today," Brad announced, slamming his hand on the podium, "I am fighting back. I am officially announcing a lawsuit against Ethan Sterling and the Sterling Foundation for $50 million in damages for defamation, emotional distress, and unlawful imprisonment. And furthermore, I demand a public, televised apology from his wife for her erratic, intoxicated behavior that started this whole nightmare." "Is that so?" The voice didn't come from the reporters. It came from the back of the room, deep and resonating like the tolling of a funeral bell. The heads of every reporter in the room swiveled in unison. The camera operators scrambled to adjust their focus. Standing in the doorway was Ethan Sterling. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo today. He was wearing a charcoal grey business suit that looked like armor. But it was his presence that filled the room, sucking the oxygen out of Brad's tiny, rented kingdom. Ethan wasn't alone. Flanking him were two imposing figures in navy blue windbreakers, their faces grim and professional. Emblazoned on the back of their jackets in bold yellow letters were three letters that made Brad's blood run cold: FBI. And next to Ethan stood Sarah. She wore a pristine white suit, sharp and tailored, looking nothing like the disheveled woman from the video. She looked like a queen coming to pass judgment. But the person who made Brad's knees buckle was standing just behind Sarah. It was Jessica. She wasn't traumatized at home. She was right there, her eyes hidden behind sunglasses, clutching a file folder to her chest. "What is this?" Brad stammered, backing away from the podium as if it were on fire. "You can't be here. This is a private press briefing. Security." "There is no security, Brad," Ethan said, his voice calm, cutting through the sudden murmurs of the press. He walked slowly down the center aisle, the reporters parting for him like water. "Because this isn't your press conference anymore. It's your arraignment." "You're crazy," Brad hissed, sweat instantly beading on his forehead. "I'll sue you for harassment. I'll add another $10 million to the lawsuit." "You can try," Ethan said, stepping up onto the small stage. He didn't shove Brad. He simply occupied the space so dominantly that Brad was forced to retreat to the side. Ethan took the microphone. "But I think your lawyers will be busy with federal charges." Ethan pulled a small remote from his pocket and pointed it at the projection screen behind the podium, which was currently displaying Brad's Justice for Brad logo. "You showed the world 20 seconds of a lie," Ethan addressed the cameras, looking directly into the lens. "You edited the truth to make yourself a victim. Now, I'm going to show them the uncut reality." The screen flickered. The logo vanished, replaced by shaky, high-definition footage. It was Jessica's video, recorded from the table. The audio was crisp, amplified by the room's speakers. "Look at the diamonds. Then look at yourself. You are ruining the aesthetic." Brad's voice sneered from the screen, his face twisted in ugly arrogance. "Get this help out of the VIP section. I'm editing the clip now. I'll destroy the little teacher. She's a nobody." The room erupted. The reporters gasped, their fingers flying across laptops and phone screens. Flashbulbs exploded like a thunderstorm. The victim narrative evaporated in seconds, replaced by the raw footage of a bully reveling in his cruelty. Brad looked like a cornered rat. He waved his hands frantically. That's a deepfake. AI, it's all AI. He has billions of dollars. He paid someone to generate that." "Is the bank transfer AI too, Brad?" Ethan asked, clicking the remote again. The screen changed. It displayed a complex web of bank statements. At the top was Argonne Systems Employee Charity Match Program. Below it, a thick red line traced funds moving to the Connolly Initiative, and from there, another line went straight to Cayman Consulting Group. "We traced the IP address used to access the Cayman account," Ethan explained, his voice turning icy. "It wasn't in the Cayman Islands. It was in your apartment on the Upper East Side, on your personal laptop. You stole $400,000 from a fund meant for sick children in inner-city hospitals, Brad. You used the company charity fund as your personal piggy bank to lease your Porsche and buy your watches." Brad froze. The color drained from his face, leaving him a sickly shade of gray. He looked at the FBI agents who were now moving up the aisle, their handcuffs glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. He looked at Jessica. "Jessica," he pleaded, his voice cracking. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them I didn't mean it." Jessica stepped forward. She took off her sunglasses, revealing red, puffy eyes, but a steady gaze. "The only mistake," Jessica said, her voice trembling but gaining strength with every word, "was thinking you loved anyone but yourself. You threatened to frame me, Brad. You put my name on those accounts to save your own skin. I'm done lying for you." One of the FBI agents stepped onto the stage. "Bradley Connolly," he announced, his voice booming. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and grand larceny." "No! No!" Brad shouted as the agent grabbed his wrist, spinning him around. The metal cuffs clicked shut, a sound that echoed with finality. "I'm a VIP! I'm a gold-tier donor! You can't touch me! Do you know who I am?" "We know exactly who you are," Sarah said. She stepped up to the podium as the agents began to drag the struggling, screaming Brad toward the side exit. The room went silent, the only sound being Brad's pathetic protests fading down the hallway. Sarah adjusted the microphone. She didn't look angry. She didn't look vindictive. She looked at the cameras with the quiet grace of a woman who knows her own worth. "My name is Sarah Sterling," she said, her voice soft but commanding the attention of every person in the room. "I am a teacher, and I tell my students every day that the truth matters, that kindness matters. Mr. Connolly thought he could erase me because I didn't look like someone important. He thought that because I wore a simple dress and sat quietly, I was weak. She looked at Ethan, who was standing to the side, watching her with a look of pure, unadulterated pride. But value isn't about what you wear, or who you know, or how much money you pretend to have, Sarah continued. True value is about how you treat people who can do nothing for you. Mr. Connolly failed that test. She paused, taking a deep breath. I will be returning to my classroom on Monday, Sarah announced, and any proceeds from the defamation lawsuit we filed against Mr. Connolly this morning, along with the money in his frozen accounts, will be donated to the scholarship fund he tried to steal from. Thank you. The fallout was swift and brutal. The video of Brad's arrest was uploaded within minutes and garnered 50 million views in 24 hours. The hashtag #BradConnolly is a fraud trended worldwide, replacing the hate that had been directed at Sarah. Argonne Systems fired him before he even made bail, and the CEO personally called Ethan to apologize, reinstating the merger on Ethan's terms. Jessica Vane served no jail time for her cooperation, though her social standing was in tatters. She accepted a plea deal that required 500 hours of community service. Surprisingly, she requested to do it at a women's shelter, telling the judge she wanted to learn how to be real for the first time in her life. But for Sarah, the real victory didn't happen in the media or the courtroom. It happened on Monday morning. The air was crisp as Sarah walked up the concrete steps of Liberty Elementary School. Her stomach was in knots. She clutched her tote bag tight, her knuckles white. She didn't know what the parents would say. She didn't know if the stain of the scandal had truly washed away, or if they would still see her as the woman from the viral video. She walked down the hallway, the smell of floor wax and chalk dust comforting her. It was the smell of home. As she reached the door to room 3B, she hesitated. The room was dark. Did they cancel my class? She worried. Did the parents pull their kids out? She pushed the door open and flipped the light switch. Surprise! The shout was deafening. 25 third graders jumped up from behind their desks, their faces beaming with joy. Streamers hung from the ceiling, and on the chalkboard, written in colorful, jagged letters, was a massive message. We love Mrs. Sterling. Standing in the corner was the principal, Mrs. Gable. She was wiping a tear from her eye. She walked over and placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. Welcome back, Sarah. We're sorry we ever doubted you. The parents, they saw the truth. They're bringing in a potluck lunch for you later. Sarah covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She dropped her bag and fell to her knees as the children rushed her. A little girl named Maya, who had always been shy, ran up and hugged her neck fiercely. I saw you on TV, Mrs. Sterling, Maya chirped, her eyes wide with wonder. You look like a superhero. Did you really put the bad man in time out? Sarah laughed through her tears, hugging the child back. Yes, Maya. A very long time out. Sarah looked out the classroom window to the parking lot. A black town car was idling at the curb. The window rolled down, and she saw Ethan. He gave her a thumbs up, his smile warm and reassuring. He wasn't the billionaire tycoon in that moment. He was just a husband, watching his wife reclaim the world she loved. Sarah turned back to her students. She didn't need a VIP table. She didn't need a $5,000 dress or the validation of high society. She was right where she belonged. She walked to her desk and sat down. All right, class, she said, her voice strong and happy. Take your seats. We have a lot of learning to do. And for the first time in a week, Sarah Sterling was sitting in the only seat that mattered. What a roller coaster of emotions, from being humiliated at a high society gala to facing a national scandal Sarah and Ethan proved that no amount of money can hide a rotten character, and no amount of lies can destroy the truth. Brad thought he could crush a simple teacher to boost his own ego, but he forgot the most important rule of life. The quietest people often have the most powerful protectors. If you enjoyed this dramatic tale of instant karma, justice served cold, and a love that stands against the world, please give this video a big thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow and lets us know you want more stories like this. What would you have done if someone spilled wine on you and stole your seat at a party? Would you have walked away or fought back like Sarah? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. We post dramatic tales of justice, romance, and revenge every single week. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.